Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Chess Down Under. Today we'll be taking a look at a really fascinating game that Duda, the Polish fighter, played on chess.com. This was a London system with some really ferocious attacking chess by Duda. Let's dive into the game. So Duda starts with d4, he has the white pieces, knight f6, bishop f4, so we have a London system, c5, e3, d5, c3. So we've got the typical pawn triangle that we see in the London system. Knight c6, knight to d2. So the idea in the London system for white of delaying playing knight to f3 is that the knight being on f3 allows black to play this annoying move, knight to h5, attacking the bishop. By delaying development of the knight on g1, our queen actually covers that square. So by delaying this knight developing move, Duda is preventing that annoying knight to h5 move attacking his bishop. We have an exchange of pawns in the center of the board. Duda recaptures. Bishop to f5, and now knight to f3. We have e6. So both sides are developing their pieces quite naturally at this stage, nothing too crazy happening. And Duda plays knight to h4, giving black kind of a taste of his own medicine. This type of maneuver is very common for black actually to do against white's dark squared bishop in the London. But in this case here, we can see that black has locked his bishop outside of the pawn chain, and he hasn't taken the time to play h6 to give his bishop a retreating square. So knight to h4 here is very effective as it guarantees that we can win that light squared bishop as white. Bishop to g6 and bishop to e2, making sure that the light squared bishop of black can't escape from the reach of the knight. Bishop to e7, preparing to castle, castles, and black castles as well. And now it's only at this stage here that white takes that bishop to ruin the pawn structure in front of black's king. And this proves to be what ends up creating a whole bunch of tactical possibilities later on in the game. Rook to e1 from Duda, rook to c8, and bishop to d3. So now white is getting his bishop on a nice, dangerous looking diagonal with some pressure here on g6 as well. Will that amount to anything? Let's have a look. Black drops his knight back to e8, looking potentially to reroute his knight. g3, Duda is looking for a kingside expansion of his pawns to support a kingside attack. Black is looking to launch his own counterplay on the queenside with a minority attack to break apart the white structure. Duda plays h4, pushing forward his pawns, taking space on the kingside, and hinting at a potential kingside attack. Knight f6, king to g2. The idea of this move, to lift the king up onto g2, is to vacate the back rank so that the rooks can potentially pile up on the h-file and support the advance of the h-pawn. b5, so black is looking to proceed with his minority attack. He'd like to play b4 and chip away at the white structure. a3, white is now making that plan much harder for black to accomplish. Black would like to play b4, but he'd need to support that by playing a5. And at the moment, playing a5 would leave his b5 pawn hanging as the bishop is pressuring that point. Bishop to d6, asking if white would like to exchange those dark squared bishops. Bishop to g5, declining the trade. And black retreats his bishop back to e7, guarding his knight. And knight to f3, slowly bringing the pieces around to the king side to prepare for an attack. Knight to h4, now asking once again the question, does white want to trade those bishops? And now here, Duda plays rook to h1. His idea now is that he'd really love for black to take that bishop so he can open up the h-file. That would be absolutely glorious for him. In the game, black played knight to a5, looking to come into some of these light squares here with his knight. But what would have happened if black took that bishop? Let's have a look. Bishop takes g5. We'd open up the h-file, And now have a look at what could happen here. Things could really get out of control very quickly for black here. Let's say, for example, black tries rook to e8, looking to push forward with e5. We simply play queen c2 with a whole heap of pressure here on g6. And now if black tries to push forward with e5, we simply sack on g6. And if black were to retake, we'd come in with our queen, threatening the knight. Let's say black tries to push forward with e4, attacking the knight, which would come with check as well. We'd simply move our knight to h4, looking to come into f5, where we'd have all sorts of crazy threats. Notice now that the knight on h4 is still hanging. Let's say black tries to shuffle his rook to f8 to try to guard some of these squares along the f-file. We'd come into f5 regardless, with all sorts of crazy threats. Queen to e8, hoping to exchange queens, but no, that's not going to happen. Knight to h6 check. The pawn is pinned, it cannot capture. The king is forced into the corner of the board. And now have a look at this. Knight to f7 check. Unbelievable. The idea is that regardless of which piece captures this knight, we will be crashing through on the h-file. Let's have a look. If the rook takes the knight, we simply take on h5 with check. The king is forced to g8 and it's a checkmate. And of course, if the queen takes instead, we have a very simple checkmate. We first take the knight with the rook and then slot into h7 with the queen. So things can get really out of control very quickly if that h-file is opened up here. So that is why back in this position here, black did not take that bishop on g5. Instead, he moved his knight to a5, looking to jump into some of these light squares. Queen to e2 with some pressure now onto e6. And now the knight jumps into c4, but it's really not doing that much. b2 is currently guarded by our queen, and while it looks nice, it's on a advanced outpost, there really isn't much happening on the queen side at the moment. So it looks pretty, but it's really not accomplishing much, that knight. Rook to d1, and now there's a whole bunch of pressure piling up on the e-file. Black tries knight to d6, and here is where Duda cashes in with all of the pressure that he's built up. He plays bishop takes g6, exclamation mark. What is going on here? In the game, black took the bishop on g5. What would happen though if black were to simply retake on g6? Well, very simple. We'd crash through on e6 with check. Black would intercept the check with his rook, but the rook is pinned. So now we'd simply take on e7 with the bishop. And notice now we are attacking both the queen and the knight. So black would be just losing another piece here. And that would be completely winning for white. So black did not take on g6. Instead, he took the bishop on g5. And now pretty much anything here wins for white. But I do like the continuation actually that Duda played in the game. He took on f7 with his bishop. And after black retook, he simply captured that bishop on g5. Now his rook is opened up. He's opened up the h-file. The black king only has one pawn in front of it. So very naked and not the safest king here. And also notice that the knight on h5 at the moment is hanging, so black needs to do something about that. He plays g6 to guard his knight. And now, I know that a lot of people would be tempted just to cash in and take this pawn on e6, but Duda plays a much stronger move here. He plays queen to d3, and now he's got pressure on g6 and on e6 at the same time as well. Black retreats his knight all the way to the corner of the board in order to guard g6. He had to do something about that. He couldn't allow that queen to come into g6 with check. Duda captures on e6, and now we've got a whole bunch of pressure on g6. He brings this queen up to d7 to try to defend laterally, but now Duda simply slides across, takes on g6 with check. Black takes the rook, white recaptures. Black intercepts the check, and now we take that loose knight that was sitting on h5. And now have a look at the way that the game finishes. Rook to d8, centralizing the rooks. Things look nice and okay for black on the surface of things, but have a look at this now. The knight simply jumps in, and actually in this position here, black resigned because the threats are just unbelievable. Can you see what white would have played here? Let's say, for example, black plays a nothing move, like a5. Have a look at this move. It is incredible. Knight to d7. Unbelievable. Attacking the rook, threatening to come into f6 with check as well, which would also fork the king and the rook. And if you think that you can take that knight with your queen, well, actually you can't. We come in here with check. The king is forced to f7. And no, we don't come into h7 thinking that we're winning the queen. No, we have something even better. Queen to f6, forcing the king back into the corner, and rook to h8, and that is a checkmate. So a huge amount of threats in this position here. Let's say, for example, black tries something else, like rook to f7. Well, we now jump into f6. We have forked the king and the rook. Say the king moves across. We take the rook. Black would recapture. And we can just have a look at the material count here. Both sides have got a queen and a rook. Black has got 3 pawns. White has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. White is up by 4 pawns here, so absolutely completely lost position. So what a absolutely fascinating attacking game by the Polish fighter Jan-Krzysztof Duda in the London system. Thank you everyone for watching, and hope you enjoyed that game.